Hello, welcome back to the advisory deck. Episode 36, I think we're at now, James.
Okay, here we go.
9 months since we first started these quirky little videos designed for business owners and business leaders. Originally filmed out on the back deck. We're in my home office today, and we're just celebrating, or just ticked over 20,000 views of the content, which it's pretty gratifying, I've got to tell you. So congratulations to you, James.
Yeah, well, what started as a bit of a fun COVID experiment when we couldn't go anywhere, do anything. Like often business plans, isn't it? You start with an idea and you see what happens, and before you know it, you're 9 months in going, what do we do next?
Exactly. So we thought it would be a really great opportunity to just pause for a moment and talk briefly about why we're doing these, who these kind of videos that we're going to continue moving forward with are designed for, what they're designed to deliver, and I suppose a couple of key learnings that we're discerning along the way. And then if you are interested in engaging and having a conversation with us in a more deeper way, you know, how that might sort of look. So if I go back to the genesis of these conversations, James, when we did sit out on the back deck and I suppose try and do something a little different during COVID as well, our ambitions, you know, in my mind, it was really about having a lighter, organic style conversation on really, you know, themes that we knew were relevant to, important to, often overlooked or underdeveloped with business leaders, that perhaps we could utilise our experience and perhaps some experts in our network to add some value through that content too, right?
Yeah, and then the reality is, I think we started, and we still do this for ourselves primarily. I think we find companies interesting. We find the challenges that people have fascinating, and we enjoy tinkering with their business plans to go, well, if you try doing this instead, what's the outcome?
Yes.
And I think that's why we've kept on going, is because we get to talk to really amazing people. We've spoken to a broad cross-section, I think as I said before, from people who are starting to bring a concept out of their head onto a page and they're not quite sure how to do that and where to go, helping groups like that, through to companies that have been around for generations, 3-4 generations in, that are successful brand name businesses, and they're still intriguing, they're still fascinating. So I think we enjoy telling the stories. There's a lot more conversations that happen off camera before and afterwards. I think we do a 20-minute snapshot and give some people some insights, but it's really what happens off camera, I guess, that we get more out of, which is also what we take to other companies along the way. Going, well, the benefit we've got isn't, we're not oracles. We don't have a silver bullet or a crystal ball. But the fact we get to speak to different companies, different people every week to see what have they done, what are they doing, how do you learn from someone who's been doing this for 30 years, how do you learn from someone who's created something brand new no one else in the world is doing. A lot of it is just helping them through a process, but also learning and saying, well, this person over here did something really interesting, have you tried that? That's often the advantage, and the conversations we have are just a snapshot of what we see behind the scenes.
It's the privilege and opportunity we have in doing the work in consulting across different industry spaces and sectors that we do, is that we get to see the commonalities, we get to see I suppose, some of the wrinkles in the fabric of plans, and then watch how they're either navigated successfully or where the traps for young players or inexperienced players might come from. And to your point, you're right, it's not about professing to have all of the answers. I think I hope a lot of the value that comes from these conversations is in the questions that we've learned to ask, as much as the observations or sort of answers that we might have distilled from it. That I think a business owner or leader today navigating dynamic, uncertain times just needs to pause every so often, be reminded and prompted to think about and ask themselves, and then identify, well, okay, what are the right paths, what are the right approaches for me to get the knowledge and the information and the data and the guidance and counsel that I might need to successfully address that, to progress where I want to get to, right?
Yeah, and the reality is that from the board, certainly from the CEO and the executive team down through the business, those who are whether directly or indirectly responsible for strategy, the reality is that you're paid not to do deep thinking every day, every week, every month. You're paid for output. You're paid to produce a certain number of widgets, whatever those things are, however you measure it, because that's what generates the revenue. And the revenue is what keeps the business going. And so it's really, really challenging. What we see more often than not is a company set up with the resources to produce the widgets, because that's where the money comes from. And when you're in there and you're cranking whatever you're cranking to produce those widgets, it's really hard to step back long enough to go, what's happening over there?
Yeah.
And then, more importantly, to observe it is one thing. To go and think about it, do the work, do the preparation, put a plan together, do the testing, do the documentation. All of that takes time. And while you're busy doing that, you're not back here producing the things you're supposed to produce. Very few companies have got the free resources, the free people sitting around going, I don't have anything to do other than think about the strategy.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge, is when you're having to crank the output wheel all the time, to step back and have the clarity of thought and the ability to distance yourself from what you're doing every day, to think about that second horizon and the third horizon. It's really tough. And I think that's a big part of the benefit we bring in, is we come in and have a conversation and you force people away from their day-to-day. But a lot of the thinking and the analysis and the market research and the documentation, the communication for staff is what we do behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And then we bring it back and say, effectively to the CEO or the board, whoever it might be, that's where we're going. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Great. Then we'll take it away and we'll keep on working. And I think that's the advantage of bringing people in externally, is that the company can keep on doing what it's doing. You can keep on cranking out whatever those widgets are. The revenue can keep going. The customers stay happy. But when you have to do that bigger piece of work, which you might only do once a year or whatever it might be, that might take you 3 months to do it, but you're not doing it all the time. That's when we come in. And I think that's the advantage we have, is that we might be working with 3 or 4 clients at the same time in different industries, but you'll learn and see something here that isn't being done in that industry. Right? So if you can do it for the first time, then that's an advantage, because the industry that you're now helping isn't doing that. They're not used to doing that. So you're applying different thinking, different models, different technology. And again, it's a resource that you can't justify in your business the whole time. And even if you had them, then they get caught up in the day-to-day as well. Right? Businesses just suck people in, and it's very easy to be busy without being productive or effective.
And even if we asked you to think strategically more frequently, or allocate a resource internally frequently, you're going to do it within a paradigm. You're going to do it within a sort of, this is how we've always thought about or traditionally think about strategy. And I suppose the opportunity that we have in, both the work that we do, but also the broader network of people that we work pretty closely with, is exposing to dimensions of strategy and different ways of thinking that you just wouldn't even do were I to give you 2 dedicated weeks sitting at your boardroom table thinking strategically.
You can't switch it on and off like that, right? It doesn't work like that.
And so, it's kind of picking the I love the metaphors, picking the sort of the record player needle up and taking it off and moving it over 3 things and saying, here's where we think you probably need to focus now. This is just for this moment in time. Knowing what those different dimensions and aspects of strategy are, understanding, I suppose, directions and lessons that are coming from a broader cohort than your immediate kind of competitor or supply chain partner pool, and then really defining and helping you progress next steps. Because I think, this is the other aspect of strategy, right? It's the governance piece. Well, okay, it's one thing to have the grand ideas, but to have that iterative, supportive advice as things move forward and the plan doesn't survive its first contact with sunlight, how do you adjust? That's something that, I know you certainly enjoy, and I do too. And I think there's real value in, how we're able to help clients in that kind of way.
And often those conversations, whether you're changing the needle, showing the age of people who are a bit younger may not understand what you're talking about there, to put a video up there.
Or something.
Often through that process, I've seen it when I've worked within corporates and you're working with an experienced board who might be dominated by the chair, or a CEO who might be a very powerful figure. They may have a view on something that's inherent in whatever they're thinking for whatever reason. It can be politically really challenging as an employee to have the conversations with the CEO, the board, whoever it might be, to say, actually, you know what, that isn't the right strategy if we want to get here. There are different ways of doing it. And I've seen again and again the relief that people have when they go, oh, you understand what we're saying. Operationally, people often know. Right? They understand that this won't work or that won't work. They haven't got the resources to do something properly. But pushing that message up is really, really tough, because you get told, oh, you're a no person. You're just coming up with problems. You don't have the skill sets. We need to find someone else. So people don't want to put their hand up and say, I disagree with where the company is going for these reasons.
Yeah.
I was listening to 5AA this morning, and there was discussion, this will date the episode, discussion about the Australian cricketers in India, who are, by and large, up until probably the last 24 hours, were being very diplomatic about the situation in India. Because why? They don't want to upset the managers of the Indian Premier League by saying this place is going really down the gurgler. Like they are facing horrible situation there. But they get paid very well to be there and entertain. So you don't want to sit there and say to your boss, we want out, this place looks horrible. So they sat quietly.
Yeah.
And I think as they're leaving, they're still being very diplomatic about what's going on. It's not about, none of the commentary is about the Indian Premier League.
No.
The commentary is about Australia and Scott Morrison not letting them back in.
Yes.
And that's a situation we see quite frequently with companies. People go, well, I'm not going to rock the boat.
No.
I might disagree entirely with what's going on, but I don't want to rock the boat. When I come in from the outside, I enjoy rocking the boat. But you do it based on science and fact, right? So you do it not because I've got a personal view on something, you do it based on market research, analysis, comparisons, internal conversations to figure out what's going on. It's not rocking the boat for the sake of it. It's rocking it to go, if you keep on going this direction, you are going to capsize. So we need to rock the boat to get it going this way. We need to change the resources, change the thinking. And again, that the reason we work with companies on longer term is you don't fix problems that are significant or get the big wins that we like to work on in 1 day or 2 days. So there is an art and a science to the strategy piece. And often, again, it's easier to say to someone, we know what we want to do, we're not quite sure how to do it, we know where we want to go, we're not quite sure how to get there. And that's why we've had these conversations. And we enjoy having the conversations because we're working with people who are going, I want my business to go from here to here. And that's exciting to work with.
I think, these Max Headroom style 2 talking heads plus some expert kind of guest presenters, it's not about standing at the front of the room professing to say these are the absolutes of how we do it. One of the reasons we bring other business leaders in to kind of talk about their businesses in real time is to show the imperfect nature and the nuances that, every business kind of has. But to percolate to the surface some of those really common themes, which is say, it doesn't matter whether you're running a liqueur business, a wine business, a finance business, these are the sort of themes that tend to be quite common in terms of perplexing, befuddling business leaders in making the right decisions. And so, again, and thinking about, the episodes that will come from here, those conversations, we're designing these in a really, hopefully easy to engage with way, but to show that these aren't textbook, boardroom, lecturing style kind of bland topics. These are real things that can be navigated successfully with a little bit of diverse thought, some different experiences and perspectives in the room, and committed folk that know how to kind of work you through this, right?
It is. There's a process we follow for these. Again, I think like, if you go and do the MBA and spend $50,000 in 3 years doing the MBA, and you figure out at the end of it that there's good ways to approach something, but the environment you work in is ever changing. I did my MBA 10 years ago. It was kind of before iPhones. You're dating it back then. The strategy back then is completely different to what it is now. But the process of documenting the strategy, thinking about it, considering the resources you require, that really hasn't changed a great deal. And that's why you can take a framework from one company to the other, one industry to the other, and apply a lot of the same thinking, because it's not about so much what the answer is, it's about what the questions are, and it's about how to validate those questions. And again, that's why I think it's a conversation that we enjoy having, because when we go through that process with a leader, with their leadership group, we're asking the questions, we're challenging the thinking, but the answers often come from what they're doing, right? And then we go, okay, well, that's the answer, that's a possibility. let's go and validate it.
Yes.
Let's go and think about it.
Yeah.
You don't want to go and release a new product or a service to the world and find out 6 months later that it was completely wrong. So there are processes you can follow. But I think that's the enjoyment we get. I know the comments we've had from others who have watched the videos have been like that too, going, well, I might be in the wine industry, but I've watched this business, it's completely different. But there was something they were talking about. It might be a customer engagement strategy, it might be marketing, it might be leadership. I thought we could do that.
It's as relevant to our business. Yeah, there's a different flavour.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. When you kind of, Chris Organ's episode comes to mind when you're talking about the power of getting the right question. You get the right question, and it all kinds of fascinating things can kind of come from there. But the process of sitting down and divining and working through the data to get to that right question, I guess, for me, one of the things that's really born out of a lot of the conversations we've had so far that applies to every business is that the clearer you can have a longer term vision for the enterprise that you're working for, that you're leading, that long-term aspirational goal, but bear in mind that you're going to need to be flexible and adaptable in an increasingly VUCA dynamic kind of world. The 5-10 year 40-page strategy document of 15 years ago just wasn't that great then, to be frank with you. It's not certainly not that valid today. But be really clear on the longer term thing, be really thoughtful and be ready to be flexible. One of the key themes I kind of took from it. What else comes to the surface for you when we think about the key things that just keep coming out over and over again in these conversations?
I think there's often, every company is different, so I think it's hard to generalise, but what we often see is that if a company is very focused on a certain product or a market and they've got the resources set up for that, often we see small and medium companies who don't have a financial accountant, a controller, a CFO in the business, they don't spend as much time thinking about their financial metrics. And as a result, over time, the profitability of a product might change and they don't recognise it. Their costs will change in certain areas they don't recognise it. Their supply costs, their inputs, whatever it might be, and you can lose profitability very slowly. It's like the analogy of putting the frog in the bucket of water or in the pan or whatever it might be, and
you
slowly
blender then.
Well, no, that's a very different situation. You're slowly turning up the heat, and before you know it, you're in a boiling pot of water, right? And that's what happens quite often. We see people and you say, well, when was the last time you reviewed A, B, C, and D? Oh, we haven't done that, but that's okay. Our problem is actually over here is our salespeople aren't selling properly. Going, well, maybe your salespeople are selling okay. That's a different conversation. But maybe the profitability on the product isn't that great, or they're trying to sell something that now isn't competitive. But if you change these things, you've got a different outcome. And again, it's a luxury in some ways to have a really good CFO or an accountant in the business. On the other hand, it's almost critical. We often say to people, the second or third most important person in the business is probably a financial person. Now, if you don't have the resources to have them employed full time, have a really good relationship with your accountant or similar to make sure they are all over your business. Because fundamentally, if you don't sell, you can't make money. But you can sell at a loss. And you can, you realise the more you sell, the more you're actually going to lose. So I think when we talk about resourcing, we often like to go and say, who are the resources? Where are they focused? And financially, a lot of companies aren't as strong on their internals as they should be. So that's one area that comes out again and again.
I think you're right. And, while we've got umpteen sources and methods to collect and interpret data of different sorts today, the pieces of data that we've always had or had for a long time, financial data, we can get a little lax with that and what are the numbers telling us. I guess the other thing that kind of comes to the surface for me in terms of what's it telling us is customer behaviours. And if there is one obsession beyond the numbers and really understanding what the numbers are telling you in your business, it's what are customer practices, actions, habits, perspectives, opinions, wants and needs doing? How are they moving? How are they evolving? Because it is so easy, particularly in a product-based business, to get very hung up on the portfolio, on the pipeline and everything that's coming out of there. But, we've heard it in so many of the interviews we've done with both kind of subject matter experts and business owners. Absolute obsession with customer experience, absolute obsession with thinking about, how am I going to add greater value to them in the years ahead in an increasingly competitive field, right?
Spot on. Absolutely. Yeah.
So a few kind of key themes that bubble to the surface, and I guess what we're really keen to do in continuing this series, we thought this was a really nice moment just to take a breath and kind of share with you, I suppose, a little of the ethos and where we're going with this, is continue to expose stories, case studies, interviews, profiles of businesses who don't have all the answers, and even the subject matter experts that we bring and kind of sit here, they don't have all the answers.
No one does, right?
No, some might profess to, but by thinking in different dimensions that we know really are important by and large when you're thinking strategically, when you've got to lead an effective team to navigate an increasingly dynamic and challenging marketplace, to do more with less. These are the kind of themes, these are the kind of questions that we help business leaders ask themselves. And then I suppose, the piece that comes from there is being in their corner and providing that ongoing support, right?
That's it. I had this conversation the other day with someone who I was trying to explain to them how we help people, and it's different ways of helping in different situations. But the analogy, and we spoke about this beforehand, was in some ways we're like a travel agent, more domestic than international, so we can keep working. But if you want to take a trip around the country, do the fantastic trip where you hook the caravan up and you spend 12 months circumnavigating it, and you've never done that before, you can either do a lot of that work yourself, figure it out, and take the risk that you've got the right four-wheel drive, the best caravan for you, and you know which way to go. Or you can come and talk to someone who's done it before, who goes, well, I'll start with A, B, and C, and then I'll go and see this person over here to get your SUV right, then I'll get that person to get the caravan right. I'll leave at this time because it's better for weather, and then I'll go this way. But along the way, you're going to run into a flat tyre, or a storm, or a flood, or a fire, and you've got to figure that out as you go along. But you've got your master plan of where you're going to go, and when you get stuck, you ring someone and go, hey, I got stuck here. We knew something was going to happen because nothing's perfect. What do I go? And our view is, well, depending on where you are, you can do these things. We can make a phone call, make it easier. And that's kind of how we work with companies to go, customers got the vision.
Yes.
Right? They know where they want to go, but they don't really know how to get there because they haven't done it before. And a lot of what we bring is just the knowledge of who to talk to, the questions to ask to make that trip more efficient, less risky, more enjoyable. But we don't have to come and sit in the car for the whole trip.
No.
And I think that's kind of what we're doing. So the conversations we have are almost like those journeys with people going, well, we can help you along the way, but you've got 12 months of travelling. So we are not going to know what's going to happen around every corner. But when it does happen, there's a fair chance we've seen something similar and we've got someone else we can bring in to help you. And that's that value add, right? You just don't have to spend all that time and effort figuring out yourself, because you probably do that trip once.
Spare tyres, jerry cans, mud maps, and snorkels for your creek crossings, hey?
That's it.
The
all
RAA
that stuff. Some people love doing it themselves. Right? And they're happy to spend 6 months figuring it out and spend the time and money, and that's fantastic. Others go, actually, I don't care about that. I just want to make sure we have a great trip. And I'd rather help or buy some time from people to help make that more enjoyable. And that's kind of what we do. And the fact that we can talk to so many people who are doing it before means that we've got insights that you don't have when you've done it the first time, because you just haven't done it before.
And that confidence to be able to sleep soundly at night, knowing that you are lifting every rock, you are considering the dimensions that just by yourself, within your own team, within your own paradigm, in your industry space, you just wouldn't do. You just don't necessarily know to do. And having folk who have been there, do work with lots of others going through similar journeys, mostly locally at the moment, as you say. I think there's a lot of confidence in that and real value. And so it's a great privilege and joy that we get to work closely with startup organisations, scale-up organisations, mature organisations too, who just see the merit in, we've done it in our industry this way for a period of time. We need to think differently. And if 2020 did anything, it's forced virtually every leader and leadership team back to the table to go, all bets are off. Let's really rethink things, regardless of whether it was a great year or a really tough year for them, right?
Spot on.
So, We love working in the corner of leaders and businesses who see the value in broad, experienced, deep and quite connected advice and ongoing leadership and strategy support services. If that is something you would like to have a conversation about, we would love to have that discussion with you. Our details are down here. We've obviously got a back catalogue now of 35 different episodes, which, you know, we think, and we have had the feedback that at some point in time, it's added real value to someone along the way. So please check out the YouTube channel, subscribe to it. We're going to continue to create pieces like this, but appreciate that those pieces in these kind of 20-minute time slots, or just over for this one, are really designed to be a preview pane into the kind of topics, the kind of approach, the kind of questions that we really help organisations try and deal with, right?
That's it.
All right, and we hope our quirky dad-style sense of humour sometimes resonates too. So, James, it's a pleasure working with you. Congratulations on getting us to 20,000 views and through 9 months and beyond COVID. We're not yet, the next Seinfeld, but we know and we want to continue to add some value to leaders as a result of these. So please reach out. And again, if you'd like to come and sit on the advisory deck with us, just give us a wee. James, as always, thank you.
Thanks, Troy.
Thanks for joining us on the advisory deck.